Right, guys. So, in this Atlantis series, we've looked how, in the first time, in the beginning, the earth was stood in and out of the water. It was an island. We've looked how the Elohim were the two morning stars, the brighter morning star and Hillel, son of the morning. The two morning stars that Job tells us once sang together, and the Benai Elohim jumped for joy. I've put it to you guys that the Benai Elohim are really the sons of the Elohim, who are the two morning stars, that I am and that I was. The Benai Elohim are the Neanderthals, the hands. We've looked at how there was a dispute, and the Yod-Heh-Vaveh himself took the man and placed him in a garden. We've looked at the events in the garden, the deed to spread the seed, which is not the serpent and sex, but the seed of the serpent. How he became the eternal cursed worm that does not die, the son of perdition, Asclepius, and how this spirit went into the tree of the I was. How Eve partook of the fruit, the unclean food, the taxi for the king of the legion. We've looked at the fall of Eden, how the garden went literally into the bowels of the earth, how this caused climate change, what they call the Younger Dryas, and left us with the Pangea map. We've talked about how Adam and Eve found themselves at the tip of the Pangea map, how Cain slew his brother Abel and became the nomad, the marked nomad, wandering the earth, scared of the Benai Elohim who already dwelt within it. We've looked at how he travelled the earth, colonizing the hands as their Messiah, as the first anti-Messiah, the first so-called world king. We looked at how Adam and Eve had a third son, Shem, and how I believe he went to dwell in the land of Egypt, what we call Egypt. And we left off with Cain the nomad, leaving what we call the Americas, and heading back to the place where I believe he slew his first brother Abel to confront his second brother Seth in the land that we now call Egypt. And that's where we're going to pick up, guys, in part 4 of Atlantis. So Cain, the marked man, the marked red man, the Darth Maul looking man, marked with a melanocyte overload, tiger style, returned to Egypt. The historians will tell us about the periods and the kingdoms. The Archaic period, the Old Kingdom, the First Intermediate period, and the Middle Kingdom. We can take a brief look at the official claims about these periods. The First Dynasty, the Second Dynasty, the Third and Fourth Dynasties, their respective pharaohs, and most importantly, the time periods that they put these kings, these dynasties in. Around 4320 BC, they claim these red sons of Seth, I believe, lived in round houses, very primitive. the sons of Seth, Heracanopolis. In this era, the most prominent guy is Narmer, Menace, Horahai, Cain. I put it to you guys that Narmer was Cain. Cain returned to Egypt as the Menace, overpowering the sons of Seth who dwelt there, bringing his army and entourage that we followed right back through the Paleo, where we've seen they like to make these dioramas. They like to make models of events, and here we can see Cain's army, or an army, carrying standards. Cain, Narmer, imposed the square mud brick houses on the people. Maybe not imposed, taught them, I don't know. Notice how they show him here with the plough, the A. The Egyptians went, the sons of Seth, from the round wooden houses to the square houses built of mud brick that we find in Egypt 100 years later, just identical to what we found at Catalhoyuk. They've also found this, remnants of a temple with an outer courtyard and then inside, pretty much like the tabernacle, guys. Of course, somebody with all the prophecy in the beginning would easily be able to tell his people to build a temple. In the Archaic period, the first dynasty, 3000 BC, we have a king's list. It's said that Egypt was in fact two lands according to folk tales. Menes was thought to be Narmer, the first mortal king after the rule of gods who united the two lands. Well, he overthrew his second brother Seth, and he did unite the two lands. By the end of the first dynasty, there appears to have been rival claimants for the throne. So I'd like to take a look at some of these seracs briefly, guys. They all seem to be the bird above the temple, various things within the temple, serpents, hands, and other stuff. Check all this stuff out, guys. These are the seracs of Narmer, Ahar, Jer, Jet, Den, and Edjib, Semiket, and Ka. These are all ways of saying Narmer. Lots of these are interesting, guys. We can see the Ka raised hand position and this arrow going up with the serpent. It's like the beheading and the Ka Kundalini coming out. Here we have the bird spirit in the serpent temple. There's loads of stuff here, guys. Check this all out. Over here, we have the Set animal. The X marks the spot on the vessel. There's a lot to break down, guys. We're not really breaking down. We're just briefly showing where we're drawing this inspiration from. This bird serpent in the temple is between these two pillars, west scepters. There's a lot on here. We see the ankh, and we see the donkey jawbone. And this stick man with the china hat, I believe is Cain, slayed his brother with the donkey jaw. This is him. This is Narmer. This is the Menace. This is Cain, who returned to Egypt to dominate his brother and his brother's people, the sons of Seth, who the Egyptians called Seth. These seracs are pretty much the same thing we found on the Chinese jade by discs the bird on the temple. This one containing the mark from the tepe that they say literally says me. Me, as in I'm, the who, the I was, the I am. Well, this one is me. I'm the who from the tepe. We see the the orbed disc going into the crescent. We find this exact serac that we find in China, the bird on the temple with the orb going into the crescent. We find this literal serac in Egypt. I think this is Den of Thieves. Now Abydos. At Abydos we find all these ruins, different burials of pharaohs, and we find over here what they call the tomb of Narmer, but they found the tomb of Narmer empty apart from with artifacts. Now I put it to you guys that Narmer came once he'd established rule in Egypt and conquered the sons of Seth. He moved on, true to style, as a nomad travelling, and pretty much like the Queen, or now King of the Commonwealth, visits all his nations, goes around the world on world tours. I believe that's exactly what Narmer, the Menace, Cain did after establishing his rule in Egypt over the sons of Seth. And that this Narmer shrine is exactly that. It's not literally his burial tomb. When he died, excuse me guys, sorry about that guys. When he died, all the countries under his empire held memorials for him. I believe that's what we find in the tomb of Narmer at Abydos, a memorial for the world king. We also find Saqqara remains of this massive structure. They found a niched facade. They call it an elite dynasty, the Mastaba of Saqqara. Now this guys, this style of wall, I'd like you to remember this, because this will come up in the next part, in the next video. We will return to this style, the progression of it. But this Saqqara is pretty much made of the same straw and mud bricks as the straw and mud brick houses at Catalhoyuk that we find all over the world, that the sons of Seth shifted from the wooden round house village type dwellings to the square mud brick houses. Well, this mastaba at Saqqara is made of the same mud bricks, but this style, this niching. We'll come back to this guys, please remember. Here's an artist impression of what the mastaba at Saqqara would have looked like. Now I found it very, very interesting when we're trying to piece all this together. That in this mastaba we had fetal position burials, along with their pots, their vessels, their symbolic vessels. And all the way around the outside they found these bull skulls. Can you see them down here guys? They were all the way around the outside. And some of you guys will be thinking what I thought immediately. This is just like what we see at Catalhoyuk. This is what they found outside the mastaba at Saqqara. Some images of the bull horns at Catalhoyuk. This is a progression. This is not a total separate culture. This is definitely progression, guys, in the antediluvian period. Just a few pictures of this mastaba at Saqqara and the mud bricks that we was talking about. We find pits of hands, guys. Chopped off hands in pits at Saqqara. Just like we find on the reliefs of the later Egyptian dynasties. Piles of hands. Okay? Literally. Piles of hands. Here's a brief diagram of what we actually found in the mastaba. Where the people went, the offering table, they set it up inside here. They had statues as if kind of like what we have at a funeral today, where you go and they bury the lower the. It's not a victim, is it? A person that's died, they lower them in and bury them. They have the funeral rites and seal it all off. So I'd include that, guys. Some more pictures of the quality, really. The mud bricks is what I'm showing you here, guys. The stage of evolution of the building. I'm trying to piece this together in some sort of reasonable timeline. Saqqara. Now here is the supposed tomb of Narmer, Menes. And here's the head that they found inside this tomb. You might remember in the last video, guys, in China, I asked you to remember a head found in an empty tomb. They're not quite the same, guys. But we've got two different populations making images of the same world king. And I believe when this world king died, all of these cultures did a ritualistic remembrance service where they all buried artifacts that they had of the world king and effigies of him. But they didn't bury him in all these places, obviously. Just shrines in memory of the world king Cain, Narmer, who was the Menes. This is where we find the Narmer mace head. Well, there's two mace heads. One's extremely large, one's a little bit smaller, and other stuff. And some of you might be familiar with the Narmer palette. Here we see the Serak of Narmer, who is the catfish, because he's pretending to be somebody else. He's catfishing. And he's in the T-shaped temple, the facaded temple that we've just looked at the facade, guys. Okay, this is his Serak at the top of the Narmer palette between these two bull heads. This indicates that this guy is Narmer. And if we look at Narmer, he is holding the mace, about to strike this guy who I believe is a son of Seth. It's showing the conquering of the sons of Seth by Narmer, who has what they call a Ra tail, which I suggest is Hanuman's tail, because he is possessed by Baal, who was Hanuman, who was the first sacrifice, the son of perdition. Cain was possessed by the spirit of Baal, who the Hindus call Hanuman, who the Egyptians call Imhotep. And I believe that's who this little bald guy carrying his pot, controlling the shoes of the guy in front of him. Because this is Imhotep, this is I'm the Who from the Tepe, possessing Cain, who is Narmer, who is Menes. The balder, Baal, okay? And here we have Horus and the Sphinx. There's lots to break down in this, guys. But over on this side, we see Baal, Imhotep, and Narmer Menes Cain, after he'd united the two lands, after he defeated the sons of Seth, he's not only got the crown of the north, he has the crown of the south too, and he has a serpent coming out of his forehead and the beard. This is certainly Cain possessed by Imhotep, capturing, conquering the sons of Seth. And we can see on closer up images, he has standard bearers, just like what we see at Calhoyuk, and all these victims are beheaded. I'd like to point out that one of these standards is a boxing glove, guys. Now, I've covered this before. It seems like a stretch, but it's certainly a boxing glove. The boxer, the squared circle boxer. This is the guy, the world champion boxer. Okay, guys? On the Narmer mace, we find some interesting details. We find this guy, Narmer Menes, carrying the hoe. The hoe, the who. He is the one who brought agriculture. He was the tiller of the ground. He has the Ra Hanumanteo. He's identified by the lily, sun, and the scorpion. He's the scorpion king, just like we see at the tepe on pillar 43. Narmer, the son of Lily. Narmer was possessed by the son of Lily. Narmer was the scorpion king. He was the tiller of the ground. He was Cain. There's plenty of details on these mace heads. I found this interesting. This is not a city glyph. If you look closely, the two lines are purposefully not connected. This, to me, is the Ouroboros. Okay, guys? We have the vulture coming down to the Ouroboros, and inside the Ouroboros is what looks like a bull and maybe a goat or sheep. There's a drawing, an artist's impression of this. I know I tell you guys not to hang on these too much, but this scene's interesting if you want to find a better picture and take a look at it. This guy is in his secret place, just like we've seen before. We've seen this with Osiris, with Gilgamesh. We've seen this with Baphomet in the 16th century stuff. We've seen this a lot, guys. This deity in his secret place. We also find lots of these ivories. This guy is smiting. This is Menes, Den. Den is the Menes. Okay? He's smiting the Sethite, the sons of Seth, overcoming. And there's lots of interesting things like the same Serax, the dog on top of this standard, the fish for Vishnu. The owner of this is the owner of the comb. There's plenty of this, guys. Plenty. I've shown you these clappers before, guys. These hand clappers. Some more drawings of these ivory artifacts, guys. The detailing on these, when studied, is very, very interesting. There's lots to point out. Things like the thorn and the vessels. Things like the mark and the three. The bird serpent up over here on the top right. This guy has a stick or a cane. And here we see some effigy at a cauldron or pot doing some sort of spell ritual. He has the fleur-de-lis above his head and the bow, the vessels. There's so much here, guys. Take a good look. This one I find very interesting as it takes me back to the Altimara caves and that relief at first of the sacrifice. We would also notice that this guy has a stick. He's behind and he's guiding what's going on here, just as we see at the Balcourt relief and the Dendera bulb relief in Dendera. Very interesting, guys. This Nikeda culture carving just harkens to me of the relief, the painting we see in the Altamara caves. This culture is where we find the mammoth carvings, the elephant tusk carvings, the bone carvings, the idols. There's a bearded man, the bald man with big ears. This is Cain and Baal. and the two females. Sorry, the female and the woman. Sorry guys, this is not flowing. And here we see the bearded man, hairy man, the X-Man with his regalia and his X. We see this we see this regularly in Egypt. We also find this pot mask with the pointed jaw. I'm going to keep going over the same stuff, guys, because it is all the same stuff. This is where we find the male and female famous bird idols with their arms in the air in the car position, one with the big erect phallus. This culture like to make these dioramas, as we've said, just like we find the slightly more primitive dioramas at Catalhoyuk. Well, now we're progressing in quality as time and experience goes on. But in this pre-dynastic or first dynastic culture under Narmer Menes, we find more advanced dioramas. Find lots of pottery, more advanced pottery. This one we can see the guy between the two pillars, the two men, just like the two pillars at Göbekli Tepe are two men. This erect guy, his erect phallus in the middle with his arms in the car position, and these feathers of Mart, aerials, horns, whatever you want to call them, coming out of his head. There's loads of stuff in all of these guys, the spirals, the spotted vessels. This one I find interesting. This guy has the cane. He has the scorpion. He has the serpent. He's leading the animals. But interesting is these three snake, serpent-like things, which again, guys, you will remember from the tepe, the three serpents from the tepe, because it is the same stuff, guys. And I believe that this is what's being portrayed on this vase. The same three serpents that we see from the tepe. And this guy with the cane is literally Cain. This stuck in Egypt as a theme. And we can find this throughout the kingdoms. Later on here, look in this carving. I believe this is from Karnak. I'm not sure. We see the same three coming down from the primitive fleur-de-lis. Do you see, guys? We even have the duck. The duck bearing the cartouche. And the cartouche has all this information inside it. The duck from the middle pillar at Göbekli Tepe, where the three snakes, serpents, whatever they are, come down, just like on the vessel, the Nakeda vessel, showing Cain with his cane, who is the Scorpion King, carrying the serpent car Kundalini of the son of perdition, the worm that does not die. It's all the same stuff, guys. This has to be it. The fish vessel, Vishnu, Fishinnu, Dagon. It's all the same stuff. And the ducks. So we see these ducks just like we see in the paleo record. Now these pallets, there's some shaped like ducks. Like the Hongshan, like the Vincha, like the ducks at Göbekli Tepe. We have duck-shaped pallets and duck idols. But we also have tortoise pallets, idols. Whatever they were used for, it's a tortoise. And of course we followed the turtle-headed man from the tepes through the paleo world to China. And now we're finding him in the Nakeda culture amongst the Narmer collection. Ducks and turtles with the Narmer palette. And fish and two-headed ducks. We also find this with the scorpion on it, because he's the scorpion king. He's the king of the locusts. The son of perdition is the king over the locusts. Okay, guys, the scorpion king. I'm not going to get too hung up into breaking down these palettes, guys. If you want to familiarise yourself with them, have a quick Google search. If you're not up to speed with them already, they're very interesting. Now the next thing we find in Egypt, in this culture, over here on the right, is this statue, this carving of what they call Min. He's, of course, the guy from Say Birch near Karahan Tepe. He's the erect master of animals holding his phallus. He is the Baal Ikligolem. It is Min. It is the same thing, guys. It's the same stuff. It's the same story. It's the same guy, and we can follow this guy throughout time and history through the artifact record. Say Birch, Sanliurfa, the Valley Kori. Well, here he is, Min, in Egypt. Of course, there's the Gebel al-Arak knife with the turtle-headed man, with the turtle helmet, and the master of animals. Just like the Say Birch guy flanked by the two lions, the Gebel al-Arak knife is the master of animals flanked by two lions, wearing the turtle helmet. And this napping is strikingly familiar to what we've seen already at Catlehoyuk and in the Americas. This beautiful, exquisite napping. Okay, guys? Here is the Catlehoyuk knife. Sorry, guys. Here is the Say Birch, master of animals, holding his erect phallus flanked by the two lions. Just like we see at Catlehoyuk, bringing the elements together, and the Gebel Arak knife. Notice how he stood on the dog heads, Anu of the Abyss. Now this is a very interesting artifact, guys, from the Nakeda culture in Egypt. If we start at the bottom, on one side we have this crocodile effigy, this Sobek looking relief. On the top here we see an Ouroboros, a snake eating its tail, and inside we don't have a small snake or a man, we have a hand. Then next to that, moving left, we have the T pillar with the Kundalini car coming down. The car Kundalini in the T pillar, like we've seen at Karahan Tepe and in the Jomon culture. I can't quite make out what this is, guys, but over here on the left, we have a swastika. So we've seen the swastika in the paleo records, Catlehoyuk. We've seen it at Sanliurfa. We've seen it in Ukraine on the bird. If you remember the ivory bird from the Ukraine. We've seen it on the Vincha duck in the chariot, the swastika on his chest. Well, here's the swastika in pre-dynastic Egypt on this stone. With whatever these things are. Is this the tree? I don't know. The T-pillar with the Kundalini, the temple, and the Ouroboros hand. With Sobek on the other side. The swastika, guys, okay? So, once Nama had established rule, I believe he selected somebody to leave in charge. And I believe he did this in every place. Kings under him. So he was the emperor, and each nation that was under his control had a king, but the king was under the emperor. And this is where we start to get the list of pharaohs, the people, the line of succession from who Cain, Nama, Den, who is the menace, who he left in charge when he moved on. And now, guys, we have a colonized world of Neanderthal hands, colonized by Cain, the traveller, the nomad, the Darth Maul, marked, melanocyte overloaded, red man. and the sons of Cain, populating the whole earth. And he returned and conquered his brother's people, Seth, and the sons of Seth. And they all bent the knee to the ways of the nomad Cain, the world's first emperor and anti-Messiah. And what we're left with at this point is a world looking something a little like this. And the land of Adam and Eve being over here, Australia, possibly Antarctica, guys. Maybe some of Tibet and the Philippines, for sure. So as we've said, Cain left Egypt, went on his world tour, probably for the third or fourth time. The ice receding, leaving more land. Headed back into what we call China. This is when I believe he started building what we find at the Hongshan, the raised platform with the two pyramidal temples on top of it. And I believe, as I've suggested before, used slave labour. The Neanderthal race, the hands. This is where the law of the monkey men in the Indian law comes from. Sons of Cain used slave labour, Neanderthal hands, to start building platforms and sacrificial temples on top of them. Always reminiscent of what we find on the Giza Plateau, which I believe is where Cain slew Abel and buried him in a hole in the ground. And from China, he returned again up this passage, what we now call the Bering Strait, which was probably connected, guys, back in to South America. Now at San Agustin, we find some interesting stuff. This stone-carved stuff. We find this man between these two pillars, and the two pillars are more men. This man holds another man. On this one, we find what looks to be a crab or a scorpion or spider-looking effigy on his chest, just like we see at the tepes. The man between the two pillars, like at the tepes in San Agustin. This is pre-megalithic, post-paleo. This is in the time when Cain, Nama, Menes, who was the world king, he'd been on his world tour colonizing the hands. He'd returned to Egypt and conquered the sons of Seth. And now he was returning, doing his next world tour, bringing the age of stone. There's loads of these carvings at San Agustin. I can't remember exactly, guys. Again, as I've said, I'm really overloaded now at this point. We find the squatting man. So, amongst this culture and this style, we find the squatting man. We find the man with his cane. We find the vampiric fanged man. And it looks like he's eating babies. Okay? It's all the same stuff. Cain brought this. It's from the tepe. It's a squatting man with the cane, possessed by the vampire who eats children. It's so simple. Okay, guys? Now another one. This Dracula, Vlad type figure between the two pillars, who themselves are men with men in their heads. At San Agustin. There's quite a few variations of these. I think these must be later copies. But this original here, guys, in the middle, from this angle, apart from the knot, there's something you might, by now, notice and recognise. Something might jump out at you guys. If I show it you like this, we see the knot, we see the Chan Chan style tying this era into the Chan Chan complex, tying them together via the styles, okay? But that's not what I'm asking, what I'm expecting you guys to notice. Now do you see, guys? So this is in the Sanliurfa Museum from Karahan Tepe. This is a Red Mountain Jade that I've shown you. This is a San Augustine pillar, column, relief, whatever you want to call it. I'm no historian, I'm no teacher. I'm struggling, guys, and I'm well out of my depth. I hope you can see with your eyes and use your discernment. Can you see, guys? This place is strewn with all sorts of stuff. The pizza-headed, chisel-pointed-faced vampire Ahriman. The bird serpent. Here we find Biggest, Min, Barlickly Golem. Okay, the guy with the erect phallus. Shown with his vampiric fangs in this instance. I think San Augustine is Colombia. I'm not too sure. I forgot more than I know, guys. And I don't mean that the way most people say it. I've seen and learned and forgot a lot of stuff. Sure, it's Colombia. This is Ahriman. So all the same stuff. The German. The face in the smoke at 9/11. Okay, guys? And the bird serpent is the bird serpent is the bird serpent. And it's from the Tepes. From the amulet at Karahan Tepe, at Gobekli Tepe. The bird serpent. The bird serpent. The Nakeda bird serpent. And the Baal Ikli Golem. Min. The Saber master of animals from Sanliurfa. And this is the progression of time. Of the antediluvian, post-garden world of Cain. Now, guys, at San Augustine, we find this skeletal type looking guy. Again, placed between these two pillars, which have faces on them. This skeletal looking guy. Remember him, guys, and I'm going to come back to him in just a moment. We also find these stone temple carvings. Many of these little temple amulets found at Pumapunka, which is in itself quite interesting. I believe this is rebuilt many times. Not just once, not just twice. There are many types of structures here, many styles. There's the original style, what we're looking at now. Then there's the polygonal megaliths. And these big columns, and then there's efforts to rebuild the polygonal findings, and then pretty standard repairs on top. And in the middle, we have some sort of megalithic construction similar to what we see in the Sphinx Temple in Egypt. But we're not quite there at that point yet. This column here, and these faces, this style, these are remains of the first building here of stone, what we're looking at, in the Tepe style. The faces coming out of the wall. You're just another brick in the wall. I put to you guys that these stone faces are not part of these other stones, but were rebuilt not long after the rule of Cain, during the time of Lamech. We'll get to this, guys. We're focusing on this style. This style, okay, guys? In the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico, find this guy with his penis, with his arms crossed, just like Osiris, the Osiris risen pose. This very primitive style. There's loads of this stuff, guys, to check out. Now, if you look at this pillar here, you'll see he has a face, and he has Ka Kundalini serpent energy rising up him, just like we see in the latest pillars, the latest findings that we've covered at Karahan Tepe. Like the Jomon idol with the Ka Kundalini coming up him. It's Shiva. It's the spirit energy, the worm that does not die of Baal. We find this at Pumapunku, Tiwanaku, in the oldest stones. If we move on to Chichen Itza, is a great example of how there's so much more underground than what we find above ground. Some of you might have seen this. NXT covered it. Within the Castillo El Diablo at Chichen Itza, inside that small but megalithic polygonal style pyramid, we find a smaller pyramid. And in there is this. Nobody seems to know what it is. I put it to you guys that this is the Asclepius, the pillar, the middle pillar, and it's flanked by two lions. It's the master of animals, or the pillar, or the phallus, or whatever, flanked by the lions. From Saybirch, Sanliurfa, from Catalhoyuk, inside the smaller, primitive pyramid, inside Castillo de Diablo at Chichen Itza. It is the same stuff, guys. This is what this is. Of course, there's ruins of this culture all over Mexico. Literally, there's windows in the modern pavement for you to look down and see the ruins that they've found, but not excavated more. This stuff is everywhere, literally, in Mexico. And it's rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt and then left. And then, more recently, Mexico City being built on top. Wall of Skulls, guys. Okay? Strikingly familiar to what we see at Pumapunku. A massive expansion on what we see in the phallic shrine at Karahan Tepe. Of course, then there's the Chula Pyramid, the biggest pyramid in the world. But it gives us an example of how it's built upon and built upon and built upon. And then the Catalhoyuks have built a monastery on the top of this. Because it is Catalhoyuks, guys. They, knowingly or not, the Catholics are Catalhoyuks. The spirit that's over it is the same. In the middle of Mexico, we find this style, what we're looking for, this head, slap bang in the middle of the ruins in Mexico City. This is the style we're looking for. This is Cain and his people's style. The news a couple of years ago, they found these vases. We'll come back to these, guys. They remind me of the bottom half of the Cumb. We found these at Saint-Chandouet in bronze. But for now, we'll just mention these pottery ones in Mexico. Mexico also has pot ducks, just like we've shown in Egypt. In the Naqada culture, the pre-pyramid culture, after the Mardi culture, pot ducks found in Mexico, and similar sort of vases to what we've found across the paleo world. And the red pottery with the black stain. Remember Ginger, the supposed earliest mummy, and his red pot with the black? We'll find all this in Mexico. We find better examples of the two heads in one. And these dioramas start to be carved out of one solid piece of stone. The skill level clearly advancing as the years went on. And this particular piece, these men stood in this circle. We'll come back to this too in the next video. We have the duck repeatedly showing up in Mexico in the artifact records, from crystal carved ducks to stone ones. We have crystal carved daggers, napped daggers of crystal. Quite exquisite, guys. Sacrificial ritualistic knives. Very reminiscent of Catalhoyuk blade. Very, very, very similar, but made of crystal. We also find these amulets of the circumpunctured orb going into the crescent, combined with the horns, which is the two pillars of Göbekli Tepe, combined on an amulet. Using Megalithomania's slides, we see different styles. We see what I believe is a later reconstruction as an attempt at rebuilding, but we see not megalithic, but really nice hewn stones starting to appear at places like Chichen Itza and Uxmal and places in the Yucatan. You can see down here, guys, I think this is Tiwanaku. I'm not 100%, but we can see here, look, we're starting to see small but nicely hewn and polygonal style appearing amongst these ruins. The shift from the Tepe pre-pyramid San Augustus style to polygonal small blocks. See, guys? We find this all over the Americas. And then Cain, of course, continued his world tour from Mexico, returning once again to Egypt and doing the rounds of his commonwealth, because together all the wealth was his. The commonwealth, the first world king anti-messiah, Cain, the Caduceus, possessed by the Asclepius, the son of perdition, Baal, Osiris, Oasir, the man from Karahan. The second dynasty. The end of the first dynasty, there appears to be rival claimants for the throne. The successful claimant's Horus name. Now, so imagine we've left somebody in control of Egypt, and their sons' have continued the throne under the Emperor Cain, calling himself the Horus. The Pharaoh calling themselves to their people in Egypt the Horus, but really being under Cain, who was the Horus. And this conflict between them. It's this period we start to see finer works Okay, guys? Finer quality. The skill level advancing rapidly. We can look at the quality of the vases, the vessels. They're improving. This black bowl here, this is the type of thing we can compare to the Hongshan bowls. The bowl with the spotted boar that we've covered before. The black bowl from Stonehenge in the UK. We find these in the 2nd dynasty. Okay, guys? And this is where we find the inscriptions of the Seth animal on the cartouche, because by this time the sons of Seth have been conquered by Cain. They've taken on, submitted, bent the knee to the Cain ways, the way of life. All the people of all the world ended up, in the end, succumbing to this evil, I suppose you could say. And the Set animal can be seen with the circumpunct on the temple, with the vase with its arms sprayed in the crescent. There's loads to this, guys. The two lords who are in him are reconciled. Okay, what does that mean to you? Horus and the Set animal. And now, in this period, we find this pillar, which is marked Hathor. And the dioramas are really, really increasing in ability and skill level. And we see this temple-like facade in this diorama. Just like the stone temple facades we find in the Americas. It's like a blueprint, a progression. It's like this guy had his people attempting to make this temple of hewn stone from day one. And it took him centuries. And here's a blueprint. Here's a diorama of the thing. We're getting this yet, guys. The UNESCO logo. I know I'm not tying this together in English very well. And I'm not presenting this like some Discovery Channel, History Channel, Praveen Mohan, Cum Giorgio Tuscalos video. But I believe, guys, spiritually, we're now getting all the goods. Saqqara, guys. The Saqqara complex. At Saqqara we find what they call, I'm not sure if it's the Tomb of the Jackal, guys. My mind, I'm getting the fog again. But inside this Tomb of the Jackal we find mummified ibis birds, dogs and cats. And how they've done the head, just the head look, it's so much like Stanley Earther style. The lion, cat. We find the world's oldest brewery. So right back here in this antediluvian time, they were making beer. Scripture tells us they were eating and drinking and giving in marriage. Just like now, to quickly jump to India and include India. Look at the current topography of this place, guys. If this isn't flood and cataclysm evidence, I don't know what is. We find obelisks and archways and pillared shrines. But what I want to show you guys is this. Just like at Pumapunku, in India what we find is rebuilt structures made of different styled elements. We can see polygonal type walls built and exquisitely carved blocks built around carvings that don't seem up to scratch. These are just like what we looked at a moment ago in San Augustus, the skeleton man. It's the exact same figure. And just like Pumapunku, this primitive Stone Age type style was added to by a much nicer, but not quite megalithic, hewn polygonal style stones. And here we can see the swastika exactly like we've seen in this video on the stone from the Narmer time period. Do you get what I'm saying, guys? This is the same figure from Pumapunku and from San Augustus, and this is the swastika we followed through the paleo to the Nakada Narmer Menace swastika. Okay, guys? This and this is not part of this. This is original. This is the same style as San Augustus and the swastika. Okay? Okay, guys? And then the polygonal stuff on top. And we're going to explain this in the next video, in the last part of Atlantis. The skeletal man from Augustus, San Augustus. It's the same guy. It's the same style. And the pre-megalithic, nicely hewn polygonal stones were added. And then we went megalithic. And it all happened very, very quickly. Between the death of the first Messiah, Cain, and the time of the second, anti-Messiah, Tubal-Cain. The stepping stone being Lamech, the Olmec. And this period is, of course, now the period where Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Okay, guys? We're just about at the end of the antediluvian period. So Cain went round colonizing the hands. He then invaded his brother Seth, who is Seth of Egypt. He made them bend the knee. He conquered them, returning as Narmer, uniting the two lands. And then off he went again, after he'd left them, worshipping his gods, worshipping the Horus, the anti-Messiah, and worshipping Lucifer, the I Was, the other morning star. He went around the world again on his tour, bringing the stonework, the more advanced but not quite megalithic stone work that we see amongst the polygonal megalithic ruins, but not quite there in skill level. And how Narmer and the Narmer head and the Chinese head, all the countries under Cain will have done this when Olamek, Hukul Khan, slew Khan. He took on his legion and his curse. He became black as night, did old Lamech, with the spirit in him, which is Baron Semede. And I put it to you guys that the strange, shining son of Lamech, the book of Enoch, was not Noah. Just like Gilgamesh was not Noah. Just like Utnapishtim was not Noah. But I put it to you guys, as I'm going to try and lay out in part 5 of this mess, that the strange shining son of Lamech, Olamech, the Olmec, aka Baron Semede, was none other than Tubal-Cain, the Buddha, who was the Zufu, who is Khufu, who turned up in Egypt. So till part 5, guys, the final part of Atlantis. May Yeshua bless us all. Wow, that's a messy video.